Bakyar Sanova and you are watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. It's a critical moment for Ukraine, say European leaders, calling for greater support and increased pressure on Russia to end the war. Lithuania declares a state of emergency over smuggler balloons originating in Belarus that disrupted aviation. And what happens when you kick millions of teens off social media? Well, Australia is about to find out. Good evening. It's a critical moment to step up support for Ukraine. Well, that's according to European leaders who met with Ukraine's Zelensky in London. The United Front follows sharp criticism from President Donald Trump, who said he was a little disappointed in Zelensky for not reviewing the latest US peace proposal. Here is the latest.
European leaders say now is a critical moment to increase support for Ukraine and raise pressure on Russia to move towards ending the war. Their message followed a meeting in London between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Monday. The leaders reviewed a new version of a peace plan drafted last week by Ukrainian and US officials.
We all support Ukraine. And we all support peace and peace negotiations to have a sustainable, a robust peace. And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands. The financing and the furniture of equipment and training programs to Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, and the fact that the Russian economy is starting to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions and the US sanctions. And now I think the main issue is a convergence between our common positions, Europeans and Ukrainians, and the US to finalize these peace negotiations and re-engage a new phase in the best possible conditions for Ukraine, for the Europeans, and for our collective security.
They agreed that more work is needed to secure long-term guarantees for Ukraine, especially as the United States pushes Kyiv to reach a faster deal with Russia. Zelensky said the most anti-Ukrainian elements from the initial November proposal had been removed, but he admitted that concerns over possible territorial concessions remain unresolved.
Thank you. Things which are very important for today, I think unity between Europe and Ukraine, and also unity between Europe, Ukraine and the United States. There are some things which we can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
Zelensky travelled on to Brussels to brief NATO officials and said Ukraine would present a revised plan to Washington on Tuesday. European governments continue to support a step-by-step process linked to security guarantees and steady military aid, while US politics add pressure for a faster deal. Moscow says it is open to talks, but Ukraine and its allies argue Russia is stalling to secure its gains.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he deeply appreciates Pope Leo's humanitarian support after meeting the pontiff at Castel Gandolfo. Zelensky said that he briefed the Pope on Ukraine's diplomatic efforts with the United States and discussed Vatican mediation to secure the return of children taken to Russia. He also extended an invitation for the Pope to visit Ukraine. The Vatican said Pope Leo stressed the need for continued dialogue toward a just and lasting peace. Zelensky will also meet Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni amid ongoing peace talks. Meanwhile, Russia says its forces are pushing forward across the entire front, claiming new gains around the embattled town of Mirnograd. At a field briefing, Russian General Valery Gerasimov told commanders that President Vladimir Putin has ordered the defeat of Ukrainian units said to be encircled there. Moscow claims control of more than a third of the town's buildings and insists neighboring Pokrovsk has already fallen. Kiev denies this, saying its troops still hold parts of both areas and are inflicting heavy losses for what it calls limited Russian advances. Lithuania's government declared a state of emergency over smuggler balloons originating in Belarus that have disrupted aviation. The Baltic state says the balloons used to transport cigarettes have forced the closure of Vilnius airport in recent weeks. Officials describe the incident as a hybrid attack by Belarus, a close ally of Russia. Lithuania's interior minister said one advantage of the emergency order is stronger cooperation with the Lithuanian military.
One of the advantages of declaring a state of emergency is increased cooperation with the Lithuanian military. During a state of emergency, soldiers can be granted special rights, which makes their operation together with the services of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, as well as independently, more effective. Legalization, participation of the military, and the application of special powers in neutralizing airspace violations.
Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have pushed through Darfur and Kordofan, forcing thousands of civilians to flee their homes. Airstrikes and attacks on markets, schools and camps are leaving many at risk and overwhelming humanitarian efforts.
Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have captured the city of Al-Fashir in Darfur and pushed east into Kordofan, forcing thousands to flee their homes. Most of the roughly 40,000 people displaced by the recent violence have stayed within Sudan, but the risk of a larger exodus remains. The UN warns that the violence could force more people to flee.
If, say, a city like El Obeid, which is even closer to Khartoum, another major city in that area, if that were to be not necessarily taken but engulfed by the war, I am pretty sure that we would see more exodus. It's the big urban centers that produce most of the displaced.
Conditions at camps remain dire, with many facing violence and loss.
This is a smaller camp, taking people also from El Fasher, but also from Kordofan and other places. And their stories are unfortunately all the same. Rape, murder, forced recruitment of children, separation of families, and sheer robbery.
The Sudanese Air Force has also struck residential areas, markets, schools and camps for displaced people. Research from Sudan Witness shows at least 1,700 civilians have been killed in airstrikes since April 2023, with repeated attacks on neighbourhoods and essential facilities. Humanitarian groups are struggling to respond as violence continues to spread, raising fears of a worsening crisis both inside Sudan and across neighbouring borders.
A deadly fire in Indonesia tore through a 7-story office building in central Jakarta, killing at least 22 people. The blaze started around midday on the first floor, where police believe a battery exploded before flames spread rapidly upward. Many workers were on their lunch break, and most victims are thought to have died from smoke inhalation. Thick smoke poured from the top levels as nearly 30 fire engines and around 100 personnel used aerial ladders to rescue people trapped inside. Firefighters extinguished the blaze later in the afternoon, allowing teams to retrieve bodies and check for survivors. Authorities say access to higher floors remains difficult as identification of the victims continues. The United Nations is urging immediate de-escalation between Thailand and Cambodia. It's after deadly clashes broke out on Monday, which killed and injured dozens from both countries, despite ceasefire agreements signed in October.
The United Nations is urging Thailand and Cambodia to do whatever they can to de-escalate and return to the ceasefire deal agreed in October. Cambodia's defense ministry accused Thailand of brutal and unlawful actions, saying 9 civilians were killed since Monday and 20 seriously injured. Thai officials said 3 soldiers had died in the fighting and 29 people had been injured. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is very concerned by the escalation, according to his spokesperson Stefan Dujarric.
We've seen the reports of airstrikes and mobilization of heavy equipment around the border. It's important that both Thailand and Cambodia do whatever they can to de-escalate and to return to the framework that was signed in Kuala Lumpur just a few months ago on October 26. They need to use that mechanism to engage in dialogue and find ways again to lower the tension. And we, of course, stand ready to support all efforts at promoting peace, stability, and developments in the region.
Both sides accuse each other of violating the ceasefire. Mali Soche-Ata, spokesperson for Cambodia's Ministry of National Defense, calls on the international community to condemn the violation.
Faced with attacks from Thailand, the Cambodian army still did not retaliate. They respected the ceasefire, the joint ceasefire agreement between Cambodia and Thailand, and other principal agreements between the two countries following the peaceful solution mechanism and through the international laws.
Thailand, however, says it acted after one of its soldiers was killed in an exchange of fire. A Thai military spokesman confirms that Air Force jets bombed Cambodian military positions and says 8 Thai soldiers are wounded as fighting intensified early in the morning. Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul says his country does not want violence, but warns that Bangkok will not accept any threat to its sovereignty. He says the government will take appropriate measures in response.
Thailand never wants to see violence. We insist that Thailand has never initiated the clashes or encroached into their land whatsoever. But Thailand will not stand for its sovereignty being violated and will proceed with appropriate measures, caution, and adhere to peace, stability, and uphold humanitarian aspects.
Malaysia urges both sides to show restraint. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim warns that renewed conflict risks undoing the work of the ceasefire he helped broker in October alongside US President Donald Trump. The border dispute led to a 5-day conflict in July before the ceasefire agreement was signed in Kuala Lumpur. Thousands of civilians living along the Thai-Cambodia border are now fleeing for safety, raising fears of a deeper regional crisis.
Pressure is steadily building between Venezuela and the United States. In Caracas, President Nicolas Maduro is doubling down on the message that national power and the military behind it is key to safeguarding peace and stability. But hundreds of kilometers away, U.S. forces are on the move in the Caribbean, advancing operations through Puerto Rico.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has stressed the importance of national and military strength in ensuring peace and social welfare. Speaking during a government review meeting broadcast on state television on Monday, Maduro framed the Bolivarian National Armed Forces as central to safeguarding the nation.
And there is the Bolivarian National Armed Forces consolidating the nation's defense system in a professional and scientific manner, with high combat morale and imperturbable serenity, exercising national sovereignty and guaranteeing the security of the entire homeland, a perfect fusion of the people, the military and the police in full development.
Meanwhile, US military forces continued their operations in the Caribbean, moving vehicles and equipment through the southern port city of Ponce in Puerto Rico on Monday. Armoured vehicles and all-terrain vehicles were driven onto trailers, while other equipment was lifted by forklifts and transported in convoys. Nearby, the guided missile destroyer USS Stockdale remained docked, and an MV-22B Osprey was filmed taxiing and taking off from Mercedita International Airport.
From tomorrow, Australia will ban under-16s from major social media platforms, the first country to set a minimum legal age for access. The step has drawn criticism from those who argue it won't be enough to shield young people from harmful content.
Have you guys tried hate?
Australia is set to become the first country to introduce a minimum legal age for social media on Wednesday. 10 major platforms such as Instagram, TikTok and YouTube will be required to block more than 1 million accounts from midnight or face fines of up to $33 million, a law criticised by tech giants and free speech advocates but welcomed by parents and child safety groups. Meanwhile, an Australian hospital is offering the country's first treatment programme for gaming and screen addiction. Dr. Daniela Vecchio, head of the Gaming Disorder Clinic at Fiona Stanley Hospital, says she began the clinic after seeing a surge in young patients presenting severe screen-related disorders.
So we started seeing an increased number of young people in the hospital, in the emergency department, who were harmed. So they were isolated at home. They had become very much reclusive. Some of them had assaulted their parents. When limits were posed, children who were refusing to go to school, we had the families asking for help. Devastated families were struggling.
The clinic has treated more than 350 patients since its 2022 pilot phase, with its youngest patient aged 5. Former patients say the support helped them break their dependency on gaming.
It sort of showed me that I didn't need to be so dependent on video games. I was very afraid to step away from video games. I was very afraid to socialize in the real world. And through the church and the video game clinic, I sort of observed in myself that I didn't really need to hide behind the screen anymore for comfort.
Critics argue the narrow scope of the ban limits its effectiveness, noting that dating websites, gaming platforms and artificial intelligence chatbots are exempt. Australia's move has drawn international attention, with Denmark announcing plans to ban social media for under 15-year-olds, and Norway says it's considering similar rules.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the escalating US-Venezuela tensions and what this dangerous new phase of military posturing means for regional stability and the wider geopolitical landscape. See you shortly.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Said the world never sleeps, but who's ready to wake you up with all you need to know about what is happening across the globe and in the region?
We are. Daybreak is live every morning, bringing you a complete wrap-up of the stories from overnight and all the news already happening in the world.
The biggest global headlines, the key regional developments, the must-read stories shaping the day.
We show them, we discuss them, we guide you through their meaning. We give you the news and a first look at the key headlines.
I'm Nadia Jani.
And I'm Lou Brown.
Join us, it's Daybreak here at A News.
Welcome back to A News. Growing tensions between Venezuela and the United States are entering a dangerous new phase. Both nations are signaling heightened military readiness, with Washington deploying warships, bombers, troops and drones near Venezuela's shores. Meanwhile, President Nicolas Maduro stressed the central role of military strength in defending national sovereignty. Amid this atmosphere of uncertainty, neither side wants to predict whether a military confrontation is imminent or what form it might take. Today we explore what these developments mean for regional stability, US-Venezuela relations and the broader geopolitical landscape. To help us break this down, we are joined by Ivani Vasseler, professor at the State University of New York. Professor Vasseler, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Professor Wasseler, how would you characterize the current state of U.S.-Venezuela relations amid this military escalation?
Well, probably this is one of the most tense moments in the relationship between the two countries. Obviously, the relations between Venezuela and the United States for a long time have been under strain with sanctions, even a coup attempt during the presidency of George W. Bush. But never, as now, we have seen this type of military deployment, U.S. military deployment in the region, in the Caribbean. So it is a great deal of tension, certainly.
So what message do you think President Maduro is trying to send with his emphasis on military professionalism and combat readiness?
Certainly is the way for President Nicolas Maduro to show strength, and particularly for his base in Venezuela, his followers. The Venezuela army is quite well trained, probably one of the best well trained in Latin America. And as we know, Venezuela has very good relations with Iran, Russia, and China, and receiving military assistance from them. So President Maduro can talk about this and show force in relation to the threat posed by the United States.
So why especially China is watching Trump's Venezuela campaign closely?
It is quite interesting what is going on. So the statements coming from China is that a request from the Chinese government, a request to United States to avoid military confrontation in Venezuela. We only can suppose, because we don't have the inside information about. But the fact is that, again, China has a very good relation with Venezuela, in fact, with many countries in Latin America. And a military conflict between the United States and Venezuela would derail Chinese plans for the entire subcontinent, I mean, Caribbean and South America.
Professor Wasseler, in your assessment, is the risk of a direct military confrontation real, or is this strategic posturing from both sides?
So it's difficult to make any prediction, particularly when we talk about the statements of President Trump. But probably direct confrontation with the U.S. soldiers fighting inside Venezuela, it seems to many analysts something unlikely. Yet, it's very possible that there's going to be some special forces inside Venezuela. They may be now, even, with two essentially objectives. One would be to try to arrest President Nicolas Maduro, to remove him from power, and to place there a government that is friendly or more friendly to the United States. The other possibility is some types of attacks, bombings to drug installations inside Venezuela. These are more likely scenarios than a war.
So Washington claims its actions are part of broader regional security operations. So how is this perceived inside Venezuela?
One of the issues when we talk about Venezuela is that we have to take into account that the Venezuelan society is quite polarized. Yes, there are many millions of followers that are followers, really. They are following President Nicolas Maduro. But there are another part of the Venezuelan society that is in the opposition. We are going to remember that not a long time ago, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee awarded the prize to a Venezuelan, Maria Corina Machado, that is the leader of the Venezuela opposition. For example, Maria Corina Machado defends the U.S. intervention inside Venezuela as her group and she has an important group of followers as well. It's difficult. Nicolás Maduro insisted that Venezuela is not involved in the activities that the United States is accusing the country of being involved. Maduro said that it's not that, and that his objective is to keep the sovereignty of his country.
So Maduro mentioned the Bolivarian National Armed Forces as the backbone of national defense. How capable and unified is the Venezuelan military today?
Based on the information that is available, they are the armed forces of Venezuela. They are capable. They are gaining strength over the years since the beginning of the previous administration. Hugo Chavez, president, who died in 2013 and then was replaced by Nicolás Maduro. Both presidents tried to give more strength, better training to the armed forces, again, with the contribution of countries such as Iran, China, and Russia.
Professor Vasiller, is there any diplomatic channel currently active between Washington and Caracas that could help de-escalate tensions?
It seems that the only direct contacts are between President Trump and President Maduro. They have spoken over the phone not long ago, a few days ago. Obviously, there are other channels trying to intervene, searching or seeking a peaceful solution. And these are some governments in the region, particularly the government of Brazil. Brazilian President Luiz Lula Inácio da Silva has been in direct contact with President Trump. Phone conversations, video conferences, and so on. And President Lula da Silva is insisting on the same, that the best solution for the problems that Venezuela and the United States may have is the peaceful solution to avoid, and this is the point, the destabilization of South America. This is of a serious risk, a serious threat.
Professor Ivana Vasiller, thank you once again for your insights and for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye.
After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia continue to deepen as representatives from their foreign ministries meet in Tehran with Chinese officials. The talks focus on implementing the Beijing Agreement signed last year to restore ties after nearly a decade of severed relations and advancing long-term cooperation. Turash Shiralilo has more.
Representatives from foreign ministries of Iran, Saudi Arabia and China met in Tehran to discuss implementation of the Beijing Agreement mediated by China between Iran and Saudi Arabia in March 2023. Based on the agreement, diplomatic ties between Tehran and Riyadh, which had been severed since 2015 following Saudi's invasion of Yemen and attacks on its diplomatic missions in Iran, were restored, and they agreed to reopen embassies and mend their political relations. According to official sources, Deputy Foreign Minister for Political Issues Majid Takhravanchi led the Iranian side in today's joint negotiations with Saudi and Chinese delegations. On Monday, he met with his Chinese counterpart, who is visiting Tehran to take part in the trilateral meeting. They discussed bilateral ties, focusing on implementation of comprehensive strategic partnership agreement signed in 2020, which is valid for 25 years. The second meeting of the China-Saudi-Iran Trilateral Joint Committee was held in Riyadh in November 2024, 1 year after the historic Beijing Agreement was signed. In the wake of the agreement, Iran and Saudi Arabia have developed close relations in bilateral issues as well as at regional forums, including the Jeddah-based Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Turash Shiralilo, Tehran, A News.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev met with Richard Rashi, Speaker of Slovakia's National Council, during his official visit to Bratislava. Rashi congratulated Ilham Aliyev on progress in advancing the peace agenda between Azerbaijan and Armenia, calling the recent normalization document historic. He also highlighted strong inter-parliamentary ties between the two countries. Aliyev thanked the speaker and emphasized that last year's signing of the strategic partnership document has created a solid basis for deepening bilateral cooperation, with both sides noting the growing role of parliamentary diplomacy. The Georgian Parliament is preparing to fast-track a new package of amendments that would alter how assemblies and demonstrations are organized and managed in the country. Lawmakers say the changes are aimed at improving public order, while civil society groups warn the measures could restrict core democratic freedoms. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more.
The ruling Georgian Dream Party has submitted expedited amendments to the law on assemblies and manifestations and the Code of Administrative Offences, introducing new rules for demonstrations held in areas with pedestrian or vehicle traffic. The draft requires organizers of non-spontaneous gatherings to notify the Ministry of Internal Affairs 5 days in advance and gives the ministry broader authority to issue warnings, suggest alternative locations or times, and intervene when protests obstruct movement. The amendments would prohibit intentionally blocking roads with people, vehicles, or structures unless crowd size makes it unavoidable. If a protest partially or fully blocks a public road, police could order the route reopened and redirect participants if the demonstration can continue elsewhere. A new 15-minute warning system would allow authorities to declare a gathering illegal and disperse if a blockage is not cleared within that time frame. Supporters say the changes clarify responsibilities and aim to balance freedom of expression with public safety. However, critics, including opposition parties, rights groups, and constitutional lawyers, argue the measures could raise barriers to peaceful assembly by expanding state discretion, limiting spontaneous protests, and increasing administrative liability. Human rights organizations have called for broader consultation and a slower legislative process, warning that the accelerated procedure reduces opportunities for public scrutiny. Parliament is expected to consider and adopt the amendments in the coming days. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News,
Kazakhstan is rerouting part of its oil exports, sending crude from the Kashagan field directly to China for the first time. The move comes as the Caspian Pipeline Consortium operates at reduced capacity, limiting the country's traditional export routes. Analysts say this marks a significant shift in Kazakhstan's strategy to secure alternative pathways for its oil. Fariza Kalimurzaeva has more from Almaty.
Kazakhstan is redirecting part of its oil flows as it sends crude from the Kashagan field to China for the first time. The shift comes at a moment when the Caspian Pipeline Consortium is operating with reduced capacity and is able to load oil through only one working terminal point, which limits the country's traditional export options. Reuters reports that 50,000 tons of crude are scheduled to reach China in December. This shipment will mark the first direct delivery from Kashagan through the Atasu to Alashanko route. And according to sources familiar with the plan, 30,000 tons are expected to be supplied by CNPC and another 20,000 tons by Japan's INPEX. Both companies are members of the NAS Caspian operating company that develops the field. While none of the companies has issued official comments, Kazakhstan's Ministry of Energy has noted that the country is now intensifying efforts to secure additional routes for exporting Caspian oil. The Atasu-Alashanko pipeline connects Kazakhstan with China's Xinjiang region and is normally used for transporting crude from other fields. At the moment, it carries about 85,000 tons of oil each month. The shift in supply routes follows a Ukrainian drone attack on 29th of November. The strike damaged one of 3 offshore loading units at the CPC terminal in Novorossiysk, while another unit was undergoing maintenance. As a result, the consortium, which provides about 1% of global oil supply, is operating with reduced capacity. The CPC route is critical for Kazakhstan because more than 80% of the country's oil exports rely on this corridor, and Kazakhstan owns a 19% stake in the consortium. Fariza Kalimurzaeva, Almaty, A News.
In northern Afghanistan, a significant cultural restoration project is now underway in Balkh province. The Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, known as TICA, has begun work on rebuilding and restoring the historic lodge of the father of Mevlana Jalaleddin Balkhi, one of the region's most revered spiritual figures. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more details from Kabul.
At the governor's office in Mazar-e-Sharif, senior Turkish officials sat down with Balkh Governor Muhammad Yusuf Wafa to confirm the start of construction on the centuries-old lodge. TICA's Deputy Director General Emmet Yorulmaz said the project marks another step in Turkey's long-standing development partnership with Afghanistan. According to TICA, more than 1,700 projects have been carried out across Afghanistan in education, health, culture, agriculture, and humanitarian support. Over 700 of these have been completed in the country's northern provinces alone. Yorulmaz confirmed that along with restoring the lodge, 2 new mosques, one for men, one for women, will also be built on the site. Governor Wafa thanked Turkey for what he called its brotherly cooperation, saying the two nations share deep cultural and spiritual ties. He described Maulana Jalaluddin Balkhi, known globally as Rumi, as a common heritage of the Islamic world. Restoring his father's lodge, he said, helps preserve that shared legacy. The governor also urged further investment in water supply projects, hospitals, roads, mosques, and assistance for returning refugees in Balkh province. With the addition of the 2 new mosques, the site is expected to become an important cultural landmark once again. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss how Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's visit to Baku is reshaping Iran-Azerbaijan relations through infrastructure projects and deeper cooperation across transportation, energy, trade and security. See you shortly.
Дорогу освободили?
Welcome back to A News. Iran-Azerbaijan relations appear to be entering a new and more constructive phase following Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's visit to Baku. During the talks, both sides emphasized expanding cooperation across energy, trade and border management, while also strengthening coordination on shared security challenges. Major infrastructure projects were also placed at the center of this renewed momentum. To help us break down the political significance of this visit and what it may mean for the region, we are joined by Faramarz Farbood, instructor of political science at Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Mr. Farbood, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Farbood, what do you see as the main political message behind Abbas Araghchi's visit to Baku at this particular moment?
Well, as you probably know, Iran's naming, at least in Iranian, let's say, reportage inside Iran for this connectivity or relationship or reevaluation of the relationship with Iran and Azerbaijan going forward has been called a neighborly diplomacy. So I think that's probably the key to look at it from Iran's perspective. Iran wants this kind of consultation with Azerbaijan in light of what Iran actually is facing, the pressures of sanctions with the events that took place between Iran and the United States and the Western world. So Iran is expanding as much as it can, exploring possibilities of furthering cooperation with all the neighboring countries, and especially important for Iran is to make sure that it becomes a connectivity hub in regards to sanction busting, let's say, and removing itself from the pressures of sanctions towards connecting itself to the Central Asia and connecting Central Asia to Persian Gulf and to the Middle East in general, and also in line with the international North-South corridor. So I think that's the major motivation of Iran in terms of its relationship with Azerbaijan. And as you said, it involves development of infrastructure and also trade relations and transit and all that kind of stuff. And there's of course geostrategic considerations and pointion that we'll have to see how it gets resolved, and that could be a prerequisite for success based on what Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi actually said. In fact, stressed, and Iranian media is also stressing that the prerequisite for these successful developments would be the continuation of the exchange of views on points of contentions between the two countries, and also very much the Iranian red line. We'll have to see how much they will stress it, which is establishing security of Central Asia with the participation of Central Asian nations rather than with interference from outside powers that Iran views as inimical to its national interests.
Mr. Farboud, which of the emphasized cooperation areas, transportation, energy, trade, or security, do you believe will shape the trajectory of both of ties most?
I think because seems to me, Iran is moving towards or shifting towards a policy of, let's say, enhancing its economic resilience in light of the sanctions. It could mean in the long term that Iran is also taking into account more than before considerations of economic pragmatism over geostrategic concerns. Although it's hard to imagine that Iran facing security issues, geostrategically speaking, could have it fully trumped over by these economic cooperation, let's say, considerations. But because of the value of economic cooperation and exploration of those possibilities, it's imaginable that you might have a balancing act in the future. So it could not be like, let's say in the past, a binary issue of black and white and nothing in between. So I expected that Iran will not resolve all of its points of contention with Azerbaijan on matters of, let's say, Azerbaijan's closeness in its relationship with Israel and its orientation towards maybe Turkey and Western powers, whereas Iran is contending with those powers. But nevertheless, pragmatism, economic pragmatism, might produce results that we would not expect in the past, for instance.
The Rasht-Astara railway has been discussed for years. What factors could finally accelerate its implementation now?
Well, the factors would be, I would imagine, I'm not too close to that detail, but I would imagine it's the question of joint ventures and investments and the frameworks that guarantee those kinds. And also the competence on, let's say, the participants to actually see through the process. So those are the issues that usually hold these projects and delay them. And we would wish to see them gone, obviously, and it depends on how, let's say, strongly they feel the sides about this issue. And I think that we are at a time that we expect seriousness on all sides.
Mr. Farboud, both sides stressed combating disinformation and external interference. Who are the actors often seen as trying to undermine Iran-Azerbaijan relations?
Well, from Iran's perspective, Iran, for instance, has concern about the shifting control over borders, like the Zangezur corridor, for example. The ability of Azerbaijan and Armenian, Armenia now to connect and also have that connected to Turkey and then connected to Europe. So it's essentially, from Iran's perspective, they see a possibility that Europe, NATO powers, using Turkey, can come all the way to the heart of Central Asia using the newly established, corridors and isolating Iran or creating security conditions, further exacerbating those concerns for Iran. From Iran's perspective, Europe coming to the heart of Central Asia could mean NATO coming to the heart of Central Asia. And NATO is United States, obviously has not resolved its issues with Iran. And of course, the other issue is Israel. And as everyone knows, Iran and Israel are not seeing eye to eye. And there was a war, 12-day war, and perhaps continuation of that in the future. Iran is also concerned that, Azerbaijan has close relationships with Israel. Israel will apparently, would be hard to imagine not to utilize any avenue that it has in order to deal with Iran, either by isolating Iran further, diplomatically, pressuring Iran further, economically, and also in security matters and war situations and all that. So Iran has those concerns.
In your opinion, what challenges continue to stand in the way of a fully normalized and trust-based relationship between Tehran and Baku?
Well, it is the issues of, I think, geostrategy that I just mentioned, not the economic stuff. Because I think from what I can understand, Azerbaijan's policy, Azerbaijan is actually moving towards, it's been a while, moving towards diversifying its sources of, of economic relationships with, neighboring countries. Aside from, let's say, Russia, this is in the context of Russia receding its influence in the region as a result of the Ukraine war. Now, from Iran's perspective, that's all fine because Iran is also interested in economic relationships with Central Asian countries, including Azerbaijan. And as you know, for instance, Iran's president, Pezeshkian, in a couple of days will be in Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan is one of the largest Central Asian countries, has a lot of rich resources, and also is interested in diversifying its economic, let's say, sources of trade. And Iran, for instance, looks at that situation and says, why can't not we become a critical transit hub connecting Central Asia to the Persian Gulf via our relationship with, let's say, Kazakhstan as well. So you can see Iran has those interests, economic interests. But with both of these countries, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, relationship with Israel, Western orientation that they have, and Iran's inability to resolve those issues in its own relationship with these, two contentious issues, Israel and the West, could mean that some of these opportunities are lost. But we'll have to see how much economic pragmatism Iran shows in line with its maintenance of economic resilience in light of the sanctions it faces.
Faramarz Farboud, thank you very much for talking to A News. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're up to date with World News for an hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.